Hello, y'all. Welcome to today's WBCA and NABC Coaches Forum on the topic of navigating and avoiding burnout. Before I introduce our panelists, I just please note that today's Coaches Forum is being recorded and will be available to view it on demand on the NABC and the WBCA website in the days coming. You can also watch all the past Coaches Forum on demand at the previously mentioned sites. So let me go ahead and start and introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Coach Ben Braun. He's a former head men's basketball coach at Eastern Michigan, at Cal Berkeley, and Rice. And Charlie Turner Thorne, which is she's a former WBCA president, a head coach at Arizona State, and she's currently the a scout for the WNBA. WNBA Phoenix Mercury team. Sorry, you have a long list of resumes. I want to get through everything.
Let's move on. Thanks, Steve.
Charlie. No, and I'm your moderator, Steve Yang. I'm currently here at, I just got here at Stephen F. Austin. I'm the associate head coach, and I'm just working on trying to get everything situated. So thank you all so much for your time. And thank you, Ben and Charlie, for doing this with us and for us, taking the time to give us your wisdom and your insight on the NABC and NBCA members, and for them to learn from y'all. So at the end, if time permits and we get done with this, if you guys do have some questions, Q&As, feel free to reach out, send them in, and we'll try to get them out to y'all. Okay. So before we start, hey, I just want to tell us a little bit about what y'all think burnout means. I mean, Charlie, Ben, I'll let you guys decide who goes first, but to you guys have been doing this for a long time, and in a good way, and that's a good thing. And tell us what your perspective is on burnout.
You want me to go, Ben?
Yes,
I'll go ahead and lead, because I'm kind of becoming the resident expert on it, because I burned it out twice. So I'm going to start with a quote. I love this quote by A.J. Swoboda. "We have become perhaps the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, and spiritually malnourished people in the history of time, in our history right now." So for burnout, I mean, that kind of, I tend to agree with that. For me, when you're physically, emotionally, socially just not having joy in what you're doing, that happened to me several times. And, you feel physical and emotional exhaustion, a reduced sense of accomplishment, devaluation. And I would say, the result is just chronic stress and just motivational changes. So if anybody out there relates to that, then way to join us today.
Well, Coach, I agree with that. And I guess I've been fortunate. I haven't experienced it a lot, but I think I saw it coming and I try to do something about it. But I think the first step is really understanding what it is. I think so many coaches don't really know that they're going through burnout because they're not sure what it is. So, if you have an idea that what the signs are, you can then recognize that you may in fact be going through it. So I think, Coach, what you said makes a lot of sense. Not enjoying yourself as you used to, but maybe losing your purpose, your direction on what you're doing. Sometimes your priorities change, and then why have your priorities changed? Sometimes burnout has something to do with that. I would think also, coaches are usually confident people. The coaches I know, but when all of a sudden you're losing your confidence, why is that? And burnout may have something to do with that. And then do you question yourself and you question people around you? When that starts happening, there's a chance, that maybe you are losing trust and your burnout may be happening. So, for all the coaches that feel like they're alone, and we all do as coaches, at times, why do you feel that you're alone? And I think burnout could have something to do with all of that. And, just recognizing those examples, I think. And then obviously, Coach, we could get into our personal examples. I've got a ton, but those are kind of the defining, I think, a definition of burnout.
Hey, Coach Ben, you're already on it. Hey, was there a time? Go ahead and share a time where you've experienced burnout in your coaching career.
I'm usually a pretty lighthearted guy, and I try to make light of things and not take things or myself too seriously. I try to always make light of a situation, and I don't care, heat of the battle, whatever it is. If you get too serious, you're in trouble. So you got to keep things in perspective. But, I notice things, sometimes you get negative. Not only do you get negative and doubt yourself, but maybe you're getting negative about your players. As coaches, we all get negative, when we get tough on our players, but we shouldn't get negative with them so much. And when you start blaming your players and not yourself or your staff, there's a sign there. And, or maybe you're making excuses for not succeeding. You're blaming the media, you're blaming your administration, although that's easy to do. I found over the years that you could always use a little more help. But you go into a season and there's a little self-doubt, and you're questioning your decision making. Did I make the right decision? Then you get to the point sometimes where you're afraid to make a decision because it's going to have consequences, and then you got paralysis. So if those things are happening, and I found those things in my life to happen from time to time, I'd have to redirect. I'd have to go back to certain things, and we'll get to those later. What mechanisms you can use to combat those things, because I don't care if it's coaching or personal relationships. We're all going to go through that, but now how are you going to deal with that? But those are the personal things. I know I used to get I used to get upset with the media, and a lot of times, whether I thought they were being fair or not. But in the end, I think that most of them were just trying to do their job. That wasn't personal. So you got to take a step back, I think.
Charlie, was there a time where you experienced burnout in your coaching career, and what was the primary cause of that burnout too?
Yeah, I think it was probably twofold. So I've been coaching 23 years, Division I basketball. I've been 15 years as a head coach at ASU. And I think part of it was just my approach. Like I'm definitely a transformative coach, somebody that really cares beyond basketball. And I kind of took an all in, all out, all the time approach, which is why we had a lot of success, but it was exhausting. And then I think just overworking. In my 15 years at ASU, I had all three of my children during the season and didn't take a maternity leave. I had 2 stints with USA Basketball, which was 4 to 6 weeks away from my team. We did the first ever outdoor women's basketball game, which I worked on for 2.5 years before that event came to fruition. So there was, just things. We'll talk about all the strategies, when you do have extra things on your plate. But for me, it was definitely dealing with all that. Should have taken maternity leaves. Woulda, coulda, should have, had I had a little better perspective and balance at the time.
Steve, I want to add something, because Coach, you're triggering some thoughts too, and we kind of like dismiss a lot of the things that happen when we're coaching, and now it's triggering some more thoughts. But sometimes with me, it was also losing sight of my role as a leader, and what would happen sometimes. I'd be concerned at times. I'd find myself being concerned with public opinion, and not really what was right sometimes. And the pressures start coming down on you, and then trying to please everybody, which you're not going to do anyway. So you got to stop. And then at times, I would be very short with my family and my friends, just to hear Coach talk about that. And I couldn't even imagine. I didn't have kids when I coached, and I've had them after I coached. So, at the end of all, I was coaching. And so, but I found myself even at times shutting out my own family, my own friends, and being short with them. And that's not a good sign. If you're going to shut off somebody, don't shut them off. And so, just to say, hey, I'm too busy. Well, we're all busy, but you can't be too busy for that. And when that happens, you're probably going through some burnout. So that I had to check myself when those things happen, and it's unpleasant, but it happens.
If I can throw out a book reference based on what Ben just said, Michael Gervais, The First Rule of Mastery. It's a book all about what he calls FOPO, fear of other people's opinions, which we're all guilty of, giving too much energy to. I just read that a few weeks ago. There's a lot of stuff I wish I would have read when I was still coaching, but I think that's a really valid point you made, Ben, is just, giving energy to other people's opinions is the surest way to make yourself miserable. And it's definitely something that can send you down the rabbit hole.
Well, you don't win. You're never going to win. I remember one time, I won't get into some specifics, but there's a funny story with one. I'll just leave you with this. But I remember, my alumni would have these expectations. And so I remember, and Coach, we coached in the Pac-12, and there was a lot of glamour trip. One of the trips that wasn't a glamour trip was Washington State. So nobody wanted to go to Washington State, Pullman. So in my infinite wisdom, I said, okay, to my alumni, I said, They said they wanted to go on a trip to LA. I said, I don't need you in LA. Everybody wants to go there to UCLA, USC. I said, why don't you make the trip with us to Washington State? We don't have any fans there. You could really be helpful. Okay, we'll go, coach. So we all went there, and we went ahead of the group, and then they showed up, and I was waiting for them because I knew this would happen. They came into the hotel about 2 a.m, and they were bleary-eyed. They had to, you know what happens, you go through Pullman, you go through Spokane, you have to make the drive. They almost ran off the road in the weather, and then they got in, they just were shaking their heads. I said, how was your trip? They said, it was horrible. I said, good. They said, what do you mean, good? I said, now you know what we went through. And we're playing the game. You're just watching the game. I said, if you want to, he said, this is horrible. How do you guys play? I said, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. I said, but if you really want to help, why don't you help us get charter flights? And I'll be darned, that group put together charter flights for us. So there was some good that came out of the bad. There was a method to my madness. You know, you got to figure out a way to sometimes do that. But, you know, it's, those things happen, you know, in the scheme of things.
I love it. I love it. Get some tips and advices on get some additional fundings and resources. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
You got to be creative.
With the Burnout, Charlie and Ben, during the season, how did you navigate that season during the Burnout? Like, what were some of the tangibles that you changed? Or just natural progression on how to navigate the burnouts that you guys were witnessing and going through?
I mean, I think when you're in it, if you're in the season and you're absolutely kind of burned out, we do what we do as coaches and we grind through it. I think, you know, until you really step back and embrace some of the strategies that I do want to get to, you know, Steve, in terms of not allowing it to happen. I mean, I felt like once I got there, I was there, and it wasn't like you were just going to go, oh, okay, well, you know, I mean, I do think, you know, there's, you know, you can delegate more, you can, you know, try to take some joy breaks, you can try to do certain things. But I think that my 2 cents for our listeners is like, you got to do that stuff on the front end. Like once you get there. So after that 15 years, I was on fumes. Like there wasn't much navigating of anything, you know, and, you know, so what I think our time would be best spent is talking about, like, what do we need to do to not allow people to get to the point where they're burned out? Because you're not going to be, you know, a 10 for yourself or your players or anybody, you know, once you get to that point. And I personally, because again, like, I came back, I did 10 more years, coached through the pandemic, a lot of things. And I was just, okay, I'm done now. You know, and I actually learned a lot of great strategies, and I didn't keep them up, even though I knew, you know. And so, I don't know, Ben.
No, I think you're spot on. I think as we troubleshoot after there's a problem and you've waited too long. There were signs along the way, and then if you think that the season's going to afford you the luxury of doing that, you're in survival mode in the season. That's the worst time that you could do it. You know, I was talking to one of your colleagues through the years, as Herb Sunday and I were just talking, and he was saying, look, I try to do some things that, you know, he and I were talking about it because he's survived all these years. I've known him since his days at Miami of Ohio, and I was at Eastern Michigan. And he made an interesting point. He said, look, at the end of the day, I like to relax. He said, and, you know, sometimes I used to turn on a basketball game, but by turning on a basketball game, it would trigger all the things I thought I should be doing. And so I stopped watching basketball. I watch bowling or some volleyball or some other sport that I know nothing about, and I get enjoyment out of that. So he doesn't want to take, you know, something that's going to trigger those thoughts. And then, you know, making time for yourself. How do you do that? Think about that going into the season. If you try to do it in the season, like I just said, and Charlie, you just said it, it's survival mode. You're on fumes. You're just trying to get through the moment. You're trying to prepare for that next game. It never ends. You know, most people don't know that coaches play their game. As soon as the game's over, their manager puts a tape in their hand. They're going to watch the game they just played. They put 9 other tapes in your hand of the teams you're going to play coming up. And so you don't have a day off. You don't have a day off during the year.
And you're doing any damage control from the game you just had with all
the players. Then you're going, then you got to address your media. You got to address the team, your players, your alumni, your parents. It's never ending. And I said that once, that you know, it's the only profession you don't have a season off, or a Sunday off, a night off. Your game's over, and most people should enjoy the game, but you don't, because you're in survival mode, and you're going to try to get to that next practice. So you got to do some things that I remember after a game one time, Charlie, you get a kick out of this. After a game, we were pretty good at home. We had a pretty good record, but we struggled with Arizona, as most people did. Lute Olson was a pretty good coach, and you went up against their teams too. And one of my assistants came up to me and they said, "Coach, how can you eat after the game? We just lost to Arizona." And I kept it in perspective. I said, "Look, we lost Arizona. We did we do everything we could do? Did we follow the scouting report? Did we play well? Did they have 8 pros on their team? I think we did okay." I said, "But I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. Go get me a sandwich, because I'm not going to lose twice. That's it. I'm going to eat." And so we already lost the game, but you got to keep things in perspective. And we don't do that all the time. And, we got to build that in, as you said. I think that was brilliant, just leading up to the season. And whatever that is, don't just think it's magically going to appear. You're going to solve this during the season. Your same habits, your same culture, your same what you do on a daily basis should be something you're doing all the time, not changing it all the time.
Well, and there's really, everybody on this call knows there's no down season. It's year round.
No, never.
Steve, you're training your team. You probably have your team there right now. You got recruit visits. You're getting ready to go out in July. There is really, the grind of the season is what it is. But then, you really aren't. That's the challenge of. I think you get better self-care and stuff when you're not like in the season. But in general, that's college coaching. There really is very little downtime.
One other thing to add, Steve, I'm sorry, but it's triggering these thoughts. I hope I'm not trying to take away from what you're asking. Great questions, and you should be able to ask them because you're coaching, and so I think coaches understand how to ask the questions. I remember when I made my transition, I got out of coaching and I made a conscious decision. I want to be there for my kids. I probably could keep coaching, but I wanted to get into what I'm doing, and I was fortunate enough to do a game of coaches at Arizona State. I'm going to put a plug in. I do the men's and the women's games at Pac-12. But my first game, I'm at Oregon State, and I'm doing. I think Rice was playing, my former team, and so I knew all the players, knew the coaches really well. And then after the game, I was with Rich Burke. You remember Rich, Charlie? So Rich, great announcer. I walk out on the court, and typical as a coach, I'm just drifting on the court. He says, "Coach, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I got to go to the media room, and then I got to talk to the players and the coaches, and then I prepare." And then he says, "Coach, you're not coaching anymore. You can go home now. Your job's done. You don't." And so, out of habit, 30-some years, you're used to doing what I said. Get the tapes in your hand, addressing the media, addressing your alumni. You have to talk to your athletic director, make sure your athletic director is doing okay. And so, you really, those pressures build up on you, and sometimes you don't even know that they built up on you. And you can laugh about it now, but when you're in it, I see things as a commentator now, and I can read people, because I'm removed from it right now. It's a lot easier to be a little more compassionate for it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, Charlie, you mentioned earlier about being prepared and preparation on it. I know on the women's side, there are over about 200 coaches or so in Division I that has about 5 years or less of head coaching experience. So what are some proactive steps that coaches can take on to avoid maybe being overwhelmed or burnt out on the job?
Yeah, great question, Steve. Let's talk about 6 really quickly. And then obviously if there's Q&A at the end, and Ben, obviously you'll elaborate, but first thing I say is just trying to eliminate the stuff that you don't absolutely have to do, because I think especially as a young coach, you feel like, well, I just want to get it done right, so I'm going to do it myself. And that's a common, not winning strategy. So I think, as you get to be a veteran coach, you can still be like that. But when I came back off my sabbatical, I figured out I was giving way too much time to club coaches. Like, I'm not going to give 2 hours a day, where this coach just wants to, talk and talk and talk, and he doesn't have 5,000 things to do like I do, and so that was one strategy. The second thing I'll say is work smarter, not harder. There's actually research that shows there's zero correlation between the amount of hours you work and your productivity. So there's studies that show people that work 55 hours were more productive than people that work 70 hours. So, and I was one of those proud people, first to the gym, last to leave, first to office, last to leave. I got over that eventually, but, get over it now, coaches, because it's really not about that. Third thing is just better self-care. Ben touched on it. You know, it's like if we want our players to show up as a 10, we need to show up as a 10. You know, so we need to get our sleep, we need to eat. Which I stunk out after losses. I stunk at that, Ben. You know, just getting your workouts in. And then, you know, this is the big thing. Like, I think coaches, those three things, you know, we're okay. We kind of know, but the emotional fitness strategies, you know, doing the best one I found in all my years is EFT, emotional freedom techniques. Talk about that later, but just tapping, you'll see it in the Olympics with certain athletes. It's acupressure plus intentional thinking. It, you know, it works on your body, you know, our energy lines, and it's just things like that, whether it's a little bit of yoga, you know, I think are super important for self-care. Delegate, you know, trust, you got to trust people. And then, you know, that's what you should be doing as a head coach. You should be empowering and you should be growing your people. So stop trying to, you know, just, I got to do this. Figure out what you don't have to do. Figure out what you want to help other people learn how to do. You know, grow coaches under you. That's, you know, Kim Mulkey's hilarious. She's like, yeah, that's just, you know, someone was like, something got said on the media where, you know, one of her coaches left. She's like, you know, they're all critical of her. Like, oh, what they talking about, Charlie? That's another skin on my wall. And it was hilarious. You know, it's like, that's right. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And say what we was wanting about Kim. I love her, and, you know, she knows what she's doing, and she's done a lot for the game. Joy breaks, you know, outside of it, it looks different. Maybe we go for a drink. Maybe we spend more family time. You know, during the day, maybe you go for a walk for 10 minutes. Just figuring out how to have rest and recovery so that you don't just hit the wall and end up on fumes. Last thing I'll just mention, this is probably the biggest one and the most important one, is unplug. So here's a not so fun fact. The average person touches their iPhone 2,617 times a day. You know, I was guilty of trying to be like too accessible all the time. I always had to be returning my text, you know, getting back to people quickly all the time. So when did I ever unplug and just be present and not work? You know, that is probably, I think, if there's any, the biggest one that I would recommend. So sorry, that was a lot. Just
no, that was good.
Ideas out there.
That's phenomenal. Coach, well said. That you took a bunch of mine, but I still got more. I was prepared for you as much as anybody. I knew you'd be prepared, so I had to do my job.
Hey, I told you I'm the queen.
No, yeah, but I'm right behind you. So, you know, I think the me time is important. That the concept for me, it's been yoga. I've been really religious about doing yoga first thing in the morning, 6 a.m. or whatever time I get in there. But I do that. It's a me time. It's just me. It's my thoughts, meditation. I try not to have any other thoughts on my plate. There's a really good book out called Yoga Gems. I forgot the author's name, but it's some spiritual things in there, some things that you can really apply to management, your team, your daily life that keeps you focused. I'll try to come up with that name, Yoga Gems. And you know, that's been really good. And I think things that you can do where you're around other people too. You don't feel like you're on that island. So with sharing a meal, I'd always share a meal every day with somebody, whether it was a staff member, a faculty member, you know, somebody that would be away from basketball. We would just, you know, we would get away, and I like to go out and have good meals. So I find that every day, you know, to do that. We'd always have a joke of the day, whether it was with our team, with our staff. I wasn't playing a joke on somebody. I was the victim of one. Learn how to laugh at yourself. You got to find sense of humor in everything you do. I think that's important. You know, and then rather than be combative with the media, your administration, which is easy to do sometimes when you don't feel like you're getting fair treatment, you know, I would find a way to bring them in. You know, how do you get them in? So we would always try to incorporate media, our administration, our alumni into our practices, our film sessions, our trips. I alluded to that earlier. We'd have a day where they were welcome to come into our locker room, welcome to come into our team meal, into our hotel. And you'd be surprised what that did. You know, we weren't hiding anything. A lot of programs might be hiding something, so they might want to do that. You know, but I felt that was a way to let them know we're pretty human too, and that we're doing things a certain way. And if they were there to write about the positive things you were doing, they wouldn't make up other things they had to write about. They wouldn't be as nitpicky, but they would feel that you were inviting into your program. So we did that a lot. And, invite your athletic administration into your events on your trips so they can really see what you're doing firsthand. It's important that you do that. And then, Charlie, with my staff, I don't know about you, but I got to where you got in terms of delegating too, but I'd go a step further and I not only would delegate, but I would demand, it was an order. They were to take some time off. I made sure that they did what you just said, whether it was their phone. We used to collect our players' phones. I collected my coaches' phones, and I said, coach said, well, coach, I need this phone. What if I said, no, we're asking our players to deprogram, take your phone, we put it in a hat, they get it after practice, after a bus trip, after a plane trip. I didn't want people not talking to one another. You could be on a plane ride, never say a word to your teammate, to your coach, your player, and that's just not right. So, find out what's going on in their life. So unplug, as you say. I like that term, unplug, and stay. That was a way you can stay fresh, stay invigorated, and we try to do that as much as possible. And I even went as far as when you say delegate, you got to really be willing to do that. Every coach says that, but are you really delegating? When we would have a scrimmage, we go on a foreign trip, my coaches would coach. I'd sit in the stands. I'd make them coaching against the team. And then if they didn't win, I'd say, okay, now what'd you learn? If you did win, why did you win? I wanted them to go through that experience so they felt it was part of their growth. And so I think you can do little things like that to, in daily practice, delegate. We say we're going to delegate, but most coaches don't know what that means. They've been used to doing it for so long. I grew up and coached NEI for 8 years. I drove the bus. I packed the sandwiches. I did the laundry. I shoveled the snow. I let the baskets down. I did it for 8 years. And then when I first got to Eastern Michigan, I still did a lot of that. So learn how to delegate. When you finally got the opportunity, delegate so the other people can do that. Takes the pressure off of you. And you need to have that pressure off you a little bit.
Ben, you and Charlie mentioned delegating, and with the NCAA rule now, you can have 6 coaches, right?
Crazy.
I've heard some other coaches saying, "What do I do with the other 2?" Like it's kind of hard to kind of take off, and what do I do?
Oh shoot! Give me 6 coaches. I wish I had them.
So talk on that, on how staffs can support one another and manage workloads.
Can I just want to add a resource based on Ben's yoga for everybody, because Down Dog is a phenomenal yoga app. If you have a university email, it's free. And it is incredible. You put in, if you want to do 5 minutes, an hour, you put in the body parts you want to focus on. If you're old like me and you just need to do restorative, I do that. It has everything. You check male or female voice, what accent, it's a fun, amazing app. So I just Down Dog, it's free, and I recommend it to everybody. Okay. So
thank you. No, thank you. That's great to know. I'm pretty into most of the yoga, and I'm not familiar with that, so I'm going to get on that right away. I hope other coaches will, but and it doesn't have to be yoga. Tennis has been a bit outlet in my life. I play very competitively. I'm still thinking there's not a coach out there. If there's any coach watching thinks they can beat me in tennis, let's go. I'm ready. I'm competitive, so we'll play. But no, I think you got to find ways and apply it to your life if you can, and take your players, do things with your team too, because it gets you out of yourself. We're here to serve our players. I know a lot of coaches, and I did when I first started coaching, thought it was the other way around, and that mentality is going to get you fired. It's going to get you miserable. What can you do to serve your players? How can you develop them? I'm proud. I had 24 players that played in the NBA. One was an All-American. That means we helped develop 23 guys that weren't supposed to be NBA players. I'm proud of that. I think that's something that my staff and I can say we were able to do. And we were also able to, stay in touch with players who have gone on beyond basketball and they've been very successful. So, you're there to serve your players. You're there to improve their lives. And if you continue to think about that versus how many games are you supposed to win, or how many games did you win, or am I going to make my bonus this year? If you do that, you're not coaching for the right reasons. So, it's tough sometimes. I know you're under pressures, but find a way just to do that and give back to your coaching staff. I still have a lot of coaches that are out there coaching today. I'm very proud of them, and I'm happy for them more than anything. See what you can do to just take yourself out of you and spend time with your team along the way if you can. That's important. I think that'll pay big dividends for you.
So yeah, thanks, Ben. That's so well said. So, and a little bit more towards your question, Steve. I think we always really worked hard. I worked hard to create a culture of kind of see a need, fill a need. I think it's really hard to have a staff that really understands their responsibilities and is also willing to have each other's back and sharing responsibilities, unless you like, that's the head coach's job to create that culture. Before anybody leaves, they're going, hey, does anybody need anything? I'm going to head out now, or we had something where if somebody just had, they're exhausted or they had a personal thing, hey, Steve, hey, Ben, I got a few calls, can you take tonight for me? And just kind of continually, but I think you have to build the culture of kind of helping each other. When they said 6 coaches, I was like, oh my gosh, if all of them are talking in practice, that's going to be a disaster. So I went, I scout, I go watch practices last year, and I thought for the most part, not everybody's utilizing that on the court, which I understand, but I also feel like, a few of the top teams in the nation, like everybody kind of knew their role too. But there's plenty to be done. I'm happy for coaches right now. Okay, you have so much more staff than we've ever had. I mean, my first year at Santa Clara, it was me and my head coach, Karen Horstmeyer. I was the active coach, strength coach, off defensive coordinator, scouting. Like I did, half of everything. And it was great for me because it trained me. So for young coaches, don't be afraid to do a lot. Start like Ben did an NAIA, start at a low level assistant and learn how to do everything. But, I do think it's nice. I think it should lead to better work-life balance. But obviously associate head coaches, hint, hint, wink, wink, Steve, you can help with the division of labor and, bring ideas about, okay, how can we now take advantage of this? And, we're not just having, we can maybe work smarter, and make sure that everybody's playing to their strengths and getting to do things that they're best at, but also growing themselves. But I think you just need a culture of see a need, fill a need. I think scouting reports, building scout teams, because you want everybody invested in every game. I always hated it when my staff was like, I won my game. I wasn't sure if they would watch for the next game. It's like, I had amazing staff, so usually they did. But, it was like, I'm like, we went into scout teams. So you had, like maybe a GA and then a coach and a coach. And I mean, as a head coach, I scouted everybody, but, for the scouting report and stuff. So that made them collaborate, and then just share the division of labor because we killed too many trees. We over scouted.
Yeah.
So we probably over prepared at times. But, I think a lot of coaches want to own their opponent and they want to be prepared. You don't give it all to your players, but as a coaching staff, you want to know everything. You don't want to be surprised by anything. So the scouting teams was something that I thought was a way for people to collaborate and also not have to, because the games come fast and furious, not have to be pulling all-nighters all the time to get their scouting report done.
Yeah, good point.
And that's really important. Charlie, you mentioned the whole balancing act. I mean, that's as a head coach too, you're going to have to balance it and kind of serve others. Ben, you mentioned serving others too, but as a head coach, let's be honest, you've got to be served as well, right? And so, and then you're talking about those who are out there, the administrators and all that, they've got to serve you. So what are some things that y'all think that y'all been head coaches before, that maybe the administrators can help you guys out, or the ADs or whoever that can help you guys and serve y'all as head coaches so y'all don't witness or feel that burnout?
Well, I've been fortunate and unfortunate, to be honest. I've had some really terrific athletic directors, and I've had some that I didn't think were so good. And I'm not going to name names of either, but in the end, you just do the best you can. But the best athletic directors and the most successful teams I've had, it's interesting, and you've heard other coaches say that, I don't care what level you're at, you have tremendous administrative support. They're in your office. Coach, what do you need? What do your players need? They get to know your players personally. I've had ADs that didn't even know who our players were. That's not a good recipe. and I had to, beg some of our, administrators to get to know our players. That's important. They want to know people in our administration. So I think that having a relationship with your administration, your athletic director, is very important. And again, I mentioned earlier, getting them involved in what you're doing is important. Telling them how much their help could make a difference in your success. I used to have the best athletic directors were involved in our recruiting. There wasn't a time where I didn't take a recruit to meet our athletic director, but the good ADs wanted to meet the players we were recruiting. The other ones were too busy, or maybe they weren't invested. They just criticize you later when you got a player, and but they weren't invested in that player. So I think those are little things you can do if you're talking about your administration to help them and educate them. That's on you as well as a coach to do that. But you really feel good when your administration is behind you, and you feel that they're there behind your kids, behind your players. They're giving you resources, the best that they can, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that. We always use the term manage up. So, and I do I know, Ben, you and I both work with coaches at times still, and mentor and help and support, and always talk to them about, you need to manage up. You need to have a relationship with your AD and or sport administrator. Like, you can't just wait for things. So when you do that, when things go sideways, you're fine. They know you, they know your program, they always know what's going on. I would schedule meetings. Hey, here's what's going on. I'd always start with positive stuff. Hey, this is great. This is great. And by the way, this is going, maybe I kind of need this, or could you possibly do this for me? And you just have to build a relationship. I mean, everything is relationships, right? We teach that to our young people all the time. And so some coaches that don't put that time and energy into managing up, as soon as they're not winning, I mean, don't expect that administration to have your back. And also don't expect to win if you don't have a supportive administration.
Right.
It's never going to happen. I sat in living rooms my entire career and said, we're going to win because our administration wants us to win. And if anybody, that you're considering doesn't have that, then just know it's not going to happen. So, and then a few things, I don't know, Steve, I don't know if we want to talk about this still, or, but what would you ask for, if you were feeling kind of burned out, and, like, what do you go to your AD? I mean, I asked for a sabbatical and I got an 8-month one, and it was amazing. That's probably too long. Yes. I'm the only coach that ever got that. Thank you.
Wow.
Love. So it was a little long to be away from the program. I mean, I would recommend, 2 to 3 months. I mean, and I've talked to a lot of coaches about this, and there's been some articles out on, kind of what I went through and what you could do, because you want to do it before you're burned out.
Yeah.
You want to take breaks and figure out how to manage your program and be able to completely just step away, unplug, re-energize, learn, grow, get better, but also just rest and recover. A few other little things I thought about, like, could you ask for money so your family can travel? I don't know if everybody has that on the men's side, but on the women's side, like, I did that for some of my assistant coaches. They had a stipend. It was really important. They couldn't necessarily afford for their family to come on some of the trips, but because they had a stipend, they could go to Hawaii with us. They could do certain things. And that just is, obviously a huge plus. And then I would think about, like, what is just one of your least favorite things that you're having to spend too much time on when you sit down with your athletic director? Is it marketing? Is it ticket sales? Is it donor cultivation? And just try to ask for more help. I spoke in the off season, raised money for our program, sold tickets, did pretty much all of my own donor cultivation. So, don't be complaining, coaches. This is the reality of our world. Just do it, but if you hate it, and you need help, ask for it, and I think those are good areas. Like, if you like it, then great. But what don't you like? I mean, you got to do your own coaching and recruiting. But outside of that, there's things that pull us away from the things that we love. And I would recommend that maybe those are the things you talk to your administration about, get some relief from.
Absolutely. And talking about that, mental and emotional well-being are topics that are being discussed more openly in today's day and age. And I see it all the time, even at our conventions on the women's side, where we do have these conversations about mental health, and it's important. How would Charlie, you and Ben, how would y'all talk about investing in your own mental well-being, like to stay energized about what we do? I know y'all mentioned reading books, yoga, but what are some things that I mean, these younger coaches that we're starting to get older, and these young coaches are coming in the game so that they can prevent themselves to be prepared for this.
I can, Ben, you want me to
Yep.
start?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to identify what your performance barriers are to some degree, to figure out what mental emotional fitness strategies might work for you. But the biggest thing is energy management. I mean, we all care about our money, how we spend our money. We all care about our time, but our most precious resources really are energy. There was a study done a while back. Matt Davidson, Syracuse, did it with college student athletes. Their number one complaint was low energy. I bet if we did it with college coaches, it would be the same.
Yeah.
And so how are they managing their energy? We had a saying, how would you feel if you could be physically energized, mentally focused, emotionally connected, and spiritually aligned with a purpose greater than yourself? Everyone's like, yeah, it's like, well, you can, you got to figure out where your deficits are. And, we would talk about energy management. We had energy, got to do these things every day to, with our athletes. But I think we were negligent in my time at ASU at times, like maybe for ourselves. So I do think that's a huge area. That's where EFT comes in, being able to just relax, being able to energize, doing some rounds of tapping. I really encourage people to look into that. It's the best tool I found in 33 years for, peak performing in life, not just in coaching. So I don't know, there's a few ideas. Ben?
Well, you hit on something that is very dear to me as well. But we had a sports psychologist, a guy I've known for many years. I don't mind bringing his name up. He's actually worked with a number of college coaches throughout the country. His name is Dr. Joseph Carr. He actually worked with Kevin Ollie when they won the national championship. He was there on the bench through the whole time, and that was a remarkable turnaround. But he had a lot to do with that. But he's been around. He's worked with teams in our league. You would know a lot of coaches he's worked with. But I remember thinking about him when I first got started. I got to know him through a former assistant, Scott Beaton, and he was from the DC area. Worked with Georgetown for many years. But I remember referring to Doc. We call him Doc Carr. He was a coach's coach. And he was not just there for the players. He was there to serve the team. But he said, look, before we serve players, you guys, just what you said, Coach, your energy level's got to be up. I even have sometimes a player that if they cared about you would say, Coach, you all right today? Your energy seems down. Are things going okay? And Matt's a pretty good kid that would come in and ask you that. But it was an alert kid and somebody that was observant. But, if sports psychology is really important. It's not just about helping you win games. It's helping you win at what you just said, a daily approach to life. If you have no energy and your spirit's down and you lose your confidence and you're not going to, have enough to go at, you're playing with one hand behind your back. So you better start there. And I've always thought that's very important. Mental health. I said that years ago. I thought, and I still think today, that every department should have a mental health wellness center. They don't. They're building all these big buildings and these research that, start with mental health. And you'll think that that's not important to college athletes or just the regular students on campus. We would solve a lot of problems if we could address those areas. So I think that's huge in my book. We made time for that a lot, very many times during this season, even in the off season. Off season, we found we had more time we could spend on that. So I agree with Coach what you said.
And just to add one thing, Ben, which I think is really important to the coaches on the call, is just, it really is us. Like almost every department now, certainly in the pros, we have all these resources, but even in athletic departments, they have counselors or sports psychologists, in place, but the coaches have to help empower, help, motivate. It's really incumbent upon us to really honor where they're at, honor that, hey, you know, counseling, okay, that's great. You know, kind of help them get there. I mean, clearly we're in an epidemic with young adults with anxiety and depression right now, athletes and non-athletes. And so I just think it's such a big part of our role to kind of be aware of it, because we're the ones that are with them every day, and to
Right.
make sure that they get the help they need. And, you know, because there's the resources are there, but to I know sometimes if we're not aware, it can get a lot worse than it needed to at times,
Right.
you know, and I know I'm kind of veering off the coaching mental health part, but you kind of brought it up, and I just want to emphasize how important it is for coaches to help their young men and women get help, you
Well,
know, and there's no shame in
no,
anymore. I mean, this is, you know, it's almost the opposite now, you know. I mean, Simone Biles and, you know, all these professional, Michael
oh,
Phelps, you know, they're all coming out and saying, yeah, you know, I was in a horrible place, you know, and this is what I did. And so anyway, sorry.
well, I want to make one more statement, Steve and Charlie, to that point, and that is, you know, as coaches, you feel a lot better when you have resources, whether it's a strength coach helping with your developing your kids, it's a you know, a psychologist or whatever it is, mental wellness. But, you know, there's another resource that I think coaches today, I know I used to always, and I was very fortunate, and maybe Coach, you were too, that you could lean on some of the coaches who came before you that I got to know, and they can impart wisdom to you, your team. I would have them talk to my team. I'd have them talk to my coaches. I would lean on them, and so I think, you know, as resources, if coaches today, if I knew I could be helped by what other coaches have gone through, why wouldn't you speak to other coaches? Say, Coach, what were your challenges when you came up? So, you know, what we're doing today would have been huge if I were coaching. I'd be on this, you know, in a heartbeat, because it's only going to help you to realize, hey, somebody else has gone through what I'm going through right now. How did you get through this? You know, how did you play road games? That's hard to be on the road. How did you play? You know, when you were supposed to win, you were ranked, or how did you play? You know, if somebody else is there to help you guide yourself through and your team through that, that would be huge. So I think you got to tap into the resources that are available to you. And I think as coaches, sometimes we think we have to do it all by themselves, and we can't be afraid to lean on veteran coaches. People have been going through this. I think you guys might remember Kermit Davis. Kermit's a very successful coach. Coached most recently at Mississippi, and I remember doing one of his games. I'm doing a commentary, and they lost by 25 points. They had a 25-point lead and lost the game. And so the next morning, I'm in the hotel, and I said, Kermit, I said, you know, I couldn't sleep last night. And he said, what do you mean you couldn't sleep? You weren't coaching. I said, no, but I've been in your shoes. And he looked me in the eye and says, I got you. I just couldn't sleep. I knew how it felt to give up a 25-point lead. So we've already been there, right, Charlie? We whatever coaches are going through now, we've done that. So, you know, don't be afraid to ask and get some guidance, or maybe there's one area you can help in. But we got to take care of Steve, you know, just as coaches, you know, giving back something that might save another coach's, maybe their career, maybe turn around their season, help them get back in touch with their team. Those are important things, and we have resources, but we don't always utilize them.
You know, and in today's society, there's so many distractions out there, right? The social media, Charlie, you mentioned the phone, over 2,000 touches on the iPhone,
Cool.
of that. There's so many distractions that can kind of maybe enhance the burnout as well. What's an advice, Charlie, you and Ben can give us, that the listeners out there, that will really help those that maybe they're currently experiencing the burnout right now, that maybe they can navigate through it?
Well, when I say unplug, I mean with social media too.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
it's to detox from, you know, not just your calls and your texts, but with your social media, you know, just leaning into just, you know, being alone, being present, being with whoever you want to be. I think that might be possibly my biggest suggestion. If you're already that's not enough, then I do think like just some extended time, you know, can help. I mean, I was horrible at taking vacation. I would take like 1 week a year. I probably retired with 5 years of vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, oh well, I should have gave it to somebody. You know, I don't think I even did that. So I do think like just taking time off, we're so proud. We want to keep working. I mean, you could recruit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if you wanted to,
Yeah.
so you just, how to prioritize your time. I feel like that's one of the biggest success behaviors people have across all disciplines. What really needs to get done, because there's always more to be done every day, no matter what. So unplugging, prioritizing, getting these strategies that we've mentioned today, like what is your routine? What are your daily routines? Are you doing your yoga, your workouts, your EFT? I think creating those for yourself, just like the athletes, we have our athletes create their routines and they have their discipline game, plans to get better. I think we need to have them as coaches, and, big picture, make time to take care of your body, make time to quiet your mind, and don't let people steal your joy.
The unplugged theme is not going to be unnoticed when my kids get back, when they come back to town. That's going to go right into effect, and I'm going to use this video as proof, Coach, that that this works. But I think you got to challenge whether it's your own kids or your players or whoever, and say, all right, let's try something. Let's try to unplug. Let's unplug, and let's tell me the differences. What was it like when you were unplugged? What did you do in its place? And let's let them really document what they did, how they felt about what they did. I think they'd find out that they were able to do some things that they probably weren't able to do when they leaned on that as a crutch. And so many people, that they have their phones right by where they sleep. I know it is for me. And when I unless I think about it, then I got to go put it in another room and charge it, and I don't want to deal with it. But if it's always around you, it's like the doctor who always feels he's on call. And if you're a doctor, you could be on call 24/7. If you're a coach, you certainly could work 24/7. But you're not going to work, as you said, you're not going to work smarter. You might work harder, but you're not going to gain anything. So I think that's a great place to start for a lot of people is to detox a little bit.
Charlie, you mentioned that one thing that came to my mind was being present in your presence. I think that's really important. And I always tell some of my mentees, like, okay, well, your best ability is your availability. You have to be available. Then again, but I contradict myself saying, hey, you know what? If they know your heart, they know you're a hardworking person. They know your intentions at all times. You don't have to be questioned. Are you doing the work? Are you, getting stuff done? So, those are a lot of things I think we have that in our minds. And so maybe we set our standards for ourselves. And I know I'm guilty of it big time.
But
we do have a question.
You said it
good,
great.
Charlie.
Yeah, you said it great. If you have positive, healthy relationships, they can wait a few hours.
Yeah.
They know you care. You have built the trust, and so we don't have to be so available. By the way, I always thought the most important ability is responsibility myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you guys touched on this too. Whether again it's your family or your players, they're going to be more impressed with not how many hours you work and that you're the hardest working coach. They're going to be impressed with the quality of the time you spend and your relationships, and that's not quantitative, that's quality. And so that's along the same format, same feeling.
Can I share one more thing along the lines? Because I had a coaching friend. I was sitting in a gym recruiting, and I'd had 2 kids. She had 5. And she's like, hey, how's the family? How many more are you going to have? And I just said, well, if I wasn't in coaching, I might have a 3rd. And she just smacked me. And she goes, what are you talking about, Charlie? He goes, it's just a job. And so I echo that to a lot of younger coaches. At the end of the day, too, when we're just, whether it's, not necessarily about having babies, but whatever it is, when we get so overwhelmed, overwrought, everything, it's just a job. At the end of the day, it's just a job. And I think that is, from that day forward, that helped me somewhat keep things in perspective, all control. That's the hardest thing about coaching. There's so many things as a coach we cannot control that impact our success directly.
I will say this, Charlie. I met your family years ago. I don't know if you remember, but it was many, many years ago. I met your kids. They're a little. I met your husband, and and that's one thing too, is to help with the burnouts, just having a supportive, partner to help you raise your kids should you have a family. And they were great. I'm sure they're tall and mature and all that now, but they were little kids running around. Your husband's watching them, and And that helps with the burnout. So your peace of mind is not, it's there. So,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Just with your partner, my partner was so good that he took care of everything. And so then it allowed me to be almost too consumed sometimes. So as a partner, don't be so good. Make sure your
you're right.
doesn't take care of everything. They need to make you, like I started coaching my son's little basketball team just so I can make sure I get to see him sometimes, and so there are things like that. But thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know we don't want to take too much of y'all's time. We've got about 3 minutes left. We do have a quick question that Geoff Mallory wanted to ask, and I'll throw that out there real quick. Do you have a list of suggestions on avoiding burnout? And also, do you have contact information to do some follow-up?
Yes. So my contact, my best email is still actually when you retire, you get to keep your email. And I have a bunch of them now, but I'm going to say ASUHOOP. So ASUHoop@asu.edu is my direct email. Best way. I kind of went through things quickly, so I'm happy to, go through, what our strategies were. And, one thing that I didn't get to was one of my favorite books is the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And in the final 4, I talked about hurry sickness, and something that I think I definitely suffered from, and we're just always, rushing, and Ben, you touched on, are you getting a little irritable? Are you like, a little bit negative? All those things cynical. Are kind of signs of burnout.
Yeah.
So to that, I have, some stuff that I can share, and hopefully it might help. I definitely have books like that book, and The Powerful Engagement is all about energy management, which is a fantastic book. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and my email is the same. I don't change anything. It's coachbraun@gmail.com. Once a coach, always a coach. I love going to coaches convention, and when somebody yells out, "Hey, coach," and everybody's looking around, but you're a coach for life. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or give you my thought on or share some of my resources over the years. Feel free to reach out to me. That would be my honor.
Yeah. Charlie, Ben, I know we're up to the hour now, but I do have one more question. If you guys are able to stay on for another 2 minutes to answer this question. She's actually at an NAIA school. She's a friend of mine. Her dad coached in the WNBA for quite some time. Carlotta Kloppenberg. She's at a small NAIA coach. She has 2 part-time assistant coaches. And, they have other jobs too, as we all know. I've been to NAIA, and your assistants may be working other jobs as well. And she sometimes feel like she can't delegate as much to them because they have other things to do. But so what are advice that y'all might have to go about this, to kind of delegate into coaches that are part-time?
Well, CK can just call me because she worked for me.
Yeah.
So I know her really well. She's killing it at Southern Oregon. She's won Coach of the Year, 2 championships in a row. And yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, if they want to be in coaching, give them, I think, you pay your dues, right? So, I mean, if she's got the right people in place and they want to really coach, then I wouldn't worry about giving them too much. I mean, that's the more you give them, the more they're going to grow and develop, and the quicker you're going to move them on to a better paying job. So, I mean, I think you want to find those young up and coming go-getters. I always did that. I never had a secretary. I had young people that just did all sorts of stuff for me. And, then we just kept moving them up and on. And so I think, obviously CK could be at coaching at any level. And so sometimes at that level, it's not as all consuming, but, I think that, find people that want to work and then give them as much as they can handle, or maybe more, because, that's how, I mean, you got to get those learning opportunities and grow and get better. And, if they really want to be in coaching, they have to learn how hard you have to work. And, it's all on the job training. This is a crazy thing, right? None of us had any training. No credentialing in coaching. I joke when I teach a class on leadership culture and coaching, and I said, it's all this credentialing for strength coaches and trainers. And, we're always talking about the new certifications. And I always joke, and you guys heard about the one for coaching, right? Yeah.
There's none. No.
There's none. It's just who you played for, who you've coached with, and your own self-education. So work on your self-education, learn from the people you're with, and, you know, want to do more. I mean, when I had my 1 year at Santa Clara and I was only assistant, I loved it. 3 years later, I was a head coach. No, I mean, seriously, I got to do everything. So that's a good thing if you really want to be in coaching. And so I would just encourage CK to challenge those young people and you know, not scare them off, but, you know, just find out what their superpowers are, though, you know, and make sure that they're, you know, she's not giving them, you know, and then also what's going to support her the best.
Well, along those lines too, in terms of delegate, most of the coaches I had were coming up as video coordinator, as grad assists. And so, you know, and then all of a sudden, I remember one coach was bugging me all the time and about getting the job. And I said, look, I'm going to give you this job under one condition. Don't ever call me again. You got the job and just now coach. And you know, you give people the opportunities to coach, and they learn by doing. And then, you know, the greatest thing you can do is not micromanage. And we didn't talk about that at all today, but I think so many coaches today micromanage. And if you micromanage, that'll be a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. You got to keep your eyes open, you know, make sure that things don't go off the rails. But when you micromanage, you're showing a lack of confidence, a lack of trust, and that coach will never get a chance to succeed. You know, you got to make some mistakes along the way too. My son's driving right now, and I let him go through a stop sign the other day. He said, Dad, you didn't stop me. I said, I want to see if you were going to stop. You didn't. And now you got to know why didn't you stop. And we talked about it. You know, and so you learn by doing. I was blessed. I got to know Pete Newell real well. Coach, you probably remember Pete Newell, the great coach at Cal, and he was by our practices, and his, you know, the greatest coaches to me today are the greatest teachers. They're teachers first, coaches second. So I was a high school and college teacher while I was coaching. So I think teaching helped my career. But when you're you know, you get these younger coaches, they have to be able, like you, to explain not what you're doing and not just how you're doing it, but why you're doing it. You know, everybody can copy somebody. Said, well, here's what you're going to do. Here's what you do. And here's how you do it. Well, why are you doing this? And so when players understand that, they're you know, they're better. And I think as a coach, when you understand that's part of the teaching dynamic, you know, when you're teaching, that's important. So I hope that for the coaches that are listening today, you know, if you're head coaches, I hope you get an opportunity to give your assistants opportunity to coach. And if you're assistant coaches, I hope you'll go see your head coach and say, Coach, I'm ready. Coach, so, you know, coach, those guys told me that I should be coaching, and we do. We think you should be coaching. And Steve, you know, you don't get a chance unless somebody gives you that opportunity. But it's the ultimate form of trust and confidence when somebody, you know, hands the keys to you and says, okay, here's the car, drive it.
Absolutely. No, this has been great, Charlie and Ben. Thank you so much for y'all's time. I mean, I know we've gone over the hour, but I mean, everyone's been interested. And obviously, we're doing this for a reason. Everyone's been asking these questions, and you two, with the great experience, have done nothing but great for our game. And I just want to personally thank you. I've learned a lot. I'm here taking notes too, but I just want to thank y'all so much for jumping on and then giving us your time to speak on today's webinar. Thank you to the listeners, to the viewers. If you did end up missing any of today's webinar, there is a full replay, and it will be available in the coming days on WBCA.org and the NABC.com. So, Charlie, Ben, I thank you so much for y'all's time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great day, and hope to see y'all soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Best of luck.